So why don't we get to the bottom of this, right? Like this team is average and they've been playing it like, but why is that, right? Like Arizona is not, playing up to the standards of Arizona basketball this season. So, I mean, what do you think it is, Ryan? Why is this team struggling so much?
There's two things, and I've been saying these two things. I've said it on past shows, and I'll say it once again. Number one, they do not have a go-to scorer that you can rely on late in games, and it's hurt them. As recently in the Oregon game. And then number two, they're a horrible shooting team. Period. 3-point, that's where they struggle the most. But overall, they're iffy in most games. Foul shots, or they struggle there most games. Some games they have. They shoot the ball well, but the most part, looking at the broad view of this season, they're just horrible at shooting the basketball. And I would say, I mean, the one good part about James Akinjo, which I do like that he does, and I do respect it, is when nobody wants to take the shot, he wants to take the shot, and because nobody else does. Terrell Brown never wants to shoot the ball. Dalen Terry is basically just having a dude with I don't know what is wrong with him. He's a zero out there. There's no point to even give him any minutes at this point. And Tabellis isn't a reliable 3-point shooter. He's good inside. Mathurin, some games, looks like the best shooter, and then looks atrocious. So, those are the two key things, and it keeps getting back to them every single game and eating them alive.
I think for me, it's the defense. That's the short and simple answer, honestly. This team has been historically bad on defense this year. Every night, it just feels like the opposing team is shooting 70 or 80% in the second half, and they literally just don't miss. UCLA shot, I think, 73% from the field in the second half last night. An average Utah team did the same thing to Arizona a few weeks back. It's just been a consistent play of bad defense, and it's a real shame because while I agree with you to an extent that this team is not a very good shooting team, but this is still a good enough offensive team. This is I think, in my opinion, more than average offensive team, in my opinion. So none of that matters because this team can't get a stop on defense. It's so bad. Arizona, goes on these runs sometimes where they just can't score a bucket if their life depended on it, right? And it happened last night. They went 6 minutes without, scoring a point, and that was the game right there. Scoring droughts happen, right? That's common for any team, but the ways you overcome scoring droughts and offensive struggles is on defense. And Arizona is just not getting stops on defense. They're not getting it at all. They're not getting it when they need it the most. They're just digging themselves a hole every time they go on these offensive slumps because, it's gotten to the point where it's just if this team doesn't score a point, you're basically down 2 or 3 points because they're going to score on the other end of the court. This team is just not good enough on defense to balance out its scoring droughts right now. It's tough to see.
Yeah, and along with that, getting back to a little bit of the scoring struggles, and just the offense as a whole, first of all, they don't have a dominant big man, obviously, and if you don't have a dominant big man, you need to make up for that in other places, and they just don't. They don't have any guy that's a knockdown shooter. I mean, I'm not even going to, anything Kurz did this year is a bonus. Nobody, some people didn't even know if he was going to play this year. And I believe he's 18 years old, very young, still has a lot to grow and a lot to learn. But he's not an elite shooter right now. And then it just seems like all the guards, basically besides Akinjo, they're not shooters. And you can't they just have too many guys that are ball handlers, point guards. And it just gets back to what I've said in the past. It's just I feel like it's a bad mix of talent, Do you agree?
Yeah, I think part of this struggles is the youth of this team. I think Arizona's best players are all freshmen and sophomores, and that's a tough dynamic for a team. When you're depending on 18 and 19-year-olds to carry your squad, right? That was honestly part of the reason why last year's team wasn't that good either. When the 3 freshmen struggled, it was game over, right? It's honestly, I feel like this is what we should have expected from this team, right? This is what we all wanted, right? No more 5-star recruits, no more one and dones. We were begging for more 3 or 4 year players. These are your 3 to 4 year players right here on this team. They're on this team right now. I think we have to kind of chill out for a second and remember that these players who play in college for 4 years, they don't typically have a good freshman season. And honestly, almost all of 3 4 year players don't even break out to their junior or senior year. So I don't think it's fair for us to expect Benedict Mathurin to score 30 points a night for the next 3 years in Tucson, right? Like, that's just not happening. Like, this team is the epitome of a work in progress. Like, consistency is the key to this team's success. So there's going to be some growing pains, right? Like, I think Dalen Terry has potential. I just think they're using him wrong. We can get into that later. But I think there's just a lot of, untapped potential on this squad. And we've seen it, right? I think especially with no postseason action this year, I think this season is all about improvement. And, while I agree that this team doesn't, feel like it's progressing in the right direction, from a game-to-game standpoint, I still think that there's a lot of raw potential in some of these players. Mathurin is a stud, right? We've seen him ball out and do his thing before. Azuolas Tubelis is a good player. We've seen him do it before. We've seen flashes of Koloko. We've seen Kurt Kriesla have a good game or two. Jordan Brown from time to time. I mean, even James Akinjo, we've seen him light the games up before. Like, we've seen these guys do stuff sometimes. So, like, the potential is there. And Sean Miller keeps stressing that, patience is going to be, the key to this team. And that's the new philosophy of recruiting for him right now. So it's annoying for us to watch right now. But I think, there is an opportunity for this team to function like a well-oiled machine. We just got to be patient with it. But I do agree. I think, we do need to hold this team accountable to some extent, right? Like, they're not progressing. It doesn't look like they're getting better game to game, right? Like we just said, it looks like, they're getting gas at the end of the season right now. So there's still, we still need to hold them accountable. But I think we need to all remember that this is the recruiting, this is the philosophy that we bought into, right? This is what we were excited about going into the season as, these guys are going to be here for 3 or 4 years. They're going to be really good. Maybe not right now, but they'll be good in a few years, right? So I don't think it's fair for us to, expect Benedict Mathurin to be dropping 30 points every night and just be here for the next 3 years. Because once you have a good year as a freshman, you're gone, right? Like, so I think it needs to be assumed that there was going to be some growing pains with this team, and we're certainly seeing some growing pains with this team.
Yeah, and as you getting back to a little bit of your comparison of this year's team and last year's team, is last year's team those three highly recruited players, they had the expectations coming in. So that's why people got frustrated with that team. These players, none of them had those high expectations. Like, all these players I believe they have 6 4-star players. They're a 4-star is a very high recruit, but it's not on that 5-star, one and done, every game matters type of mentality. So I think that's where it differs. And it's just crazy to look at. If you're looking at the season as a whole and just standing back and watching and rewatching some of the games, it's like Benedict Mathurin has had multiple 20-point games. Like, nobody even thought Benedict Mathurin, he didn't even start the year. He wasn't even a starter. Azuolas Tubelis wasn't even a starter on this team. So, yeah, so you do got to put it in perspective, but I think it's time to get into Sean Miller a little bit. And the one thing that I wanted to get into is a quote that he said after the Oregon loss. And he said, I have to be better. I have to be better late in games. And the question that brings that up and comes to my mind is, and I would say, when do you get better late in games? This is his 13th year in Arizona. So if 13 years is enough, what do you need? Another 13? When do you actually start to figure it out late in games? I'm not saying not every coach obviously is on that championship level that is going to compete at the top of the top level every year. And I don't think Sean Miller is that coach and will get to that level. But it's to say that it just doesn't make sense. I know it's frustrating, but when do you figure it out? That's what I would say. He's had so many great recruiting classes and just never can get it right. And it's not to be chokes in the Final Four, chokes in the championship. You're choking in the first round with DeAndre Ayton. That's the type of stuff that just boggles my mind. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's tough. I'm not ready to give up on Sean Miller yet, but I do think he has a lot to be held accountable for. this team really hasn't been elite in 3 or 4 years now. And it's not like, we had that good recruiting class last year. And part of that was, with the ESPN scandal, and that kind of ruined the recruiting class a little bit too. But the talent is there on this team. So like you start looking around, it's like, who do you blame, right? Well, it's like, you had a team with DeAndre Ayton and Alonzo Trier and Raleigh Hawkins. That team was loaded, and I got bounced in the first round. Like, what the heck was that about? Like, this team, hasn't been in the NCAA tournament in a few years. Like, it's just like Arizona, the expectations need to be there, and he has the tools to, make these runs in the NCAA tournament. But I don't know. I just think I'm not quite ready to give up on him yet, because I think this new, recruiting philosophy that, he's, just now started to really buy into this year of, building up